sign, this billboard coming into Minneapolis where it says Minnesota is #1 in voter fraud. You have studied this for some time. Would you address that? People want to know, are we #1 in voter fraud?
You know, Pat, I think the proposition that Minnesota leads the country in voter fraud is laughable. If anything, we lead the country in successful prosecutions. I suspect we may lead the country in the number of people who are in prison today as a consequence of us prosecuting them. Interestingly, the two people who were raised in the lawsuit that was decided in the federal court last week are both in prison today because we did detect that they had violated the law and prosecuted them, and they were incarcerated as a result. Over the last 6 years, more than 500,000 people have voted in the city of St. Paul. Our compliance rate is better than 99.98%. That's the small number of convictions that we have, the small number of violations.
Would the voter ID amendment prevent voter fraud?
It would have prevented none of the prosecutable cases that we got. Of that number, all but one were voting or registration by people on felony supervision who have a valid driver's license. The other person was in the United States on a protective visa and voted even though he was not a U.S. citizen.
So you're saying zero people
this proposal, the proposal that will go on the ballot, would have deterred none of the cases that we prosecuted.
Go ahead. Look at a felon voting is a crime. That's why they get prosecuted. A non-citizen voting is a crime. That's why that's prosecuted. Voting as a student is not a crime. Voting as a senior is not a crime. Voting as a veteran is not a crime. That's the problem with this amendment. All of a sudden, you take a problem that is being fully addressed by the criminal justice system, and you start spreading that to legitimate voters who, as Mayor Rybak gave one example of, may or may not be able to get a valid driver's license. And you take that and you put them on the same plane as a criminal or non-citizen attempting to vote, where they're clearly, as Joe has outlined, not a problem. This is just that billboard that you're talking about is just another example of how they have twisted this issue. They have tried to confuse people. They have tried to scare people, and they are taking a situation and making what should be the great pride of the state of Minnesota, which is that we are one of the highest turnout states in the entire country, if not the highest state, and turn us into a backward state where people are restricted from voting. I think it's a tragedy.
I could put up a billboard saying I'm Christian Ponder, but it wouldn't mean I could throw a touchdown pass. And they can put up a billboard saying we're #1 in voter fraud, but it's a flat-out fraud. And everyone in the media, I believe, needs to call them into account for it. You can't, you can put up a billboard saying anything. It doesn't make it true.